Welcome to another Art in the House at Home video. Hi everyone, I'm April Sunami, and today's Art in the House art activity is going to be around Dave the Potter. So I was up in my kids' room and I rediscovered this wonderful book that's there. This book is called Dave the Potter. It is by LeBren Carrick Hill, and it is illustrated by one of my favorite children's book illustrators. His name is Brian Collier. And what a fascinating story. So, not much is known about Dave the Potter. We know that he was an artist, he was a poet, and he was also enslaved. He was born in the 1800s. He lived in South Carolina, and it was likely that he was owned by a man named Harvey Drake. We believe that Dave lived in a town called Edgeville, South Carolina. And in Edgeville, and there were a bunch of other communities around it, even one called Pottersville, and they were known for making and manufacturing stoneware, so pots and different things made out of clay, pots and jars and things like that. And the enslaved people would actually make the pots, and Dave was one of those people. We also know that Dave was literate. He wrote a number of poems on the sides of his pots. He would inscribe the pots with his poetry. But back then, it was illegal for the enslaved to read, to write, or for anybody to teach someone who's enslaved to read or write. And so this is another mystery of Dave the Potter. So I will read the book, and at the end of this, we will make our own pinch pot or coil pot. So let's go. All right. So Dave the Potter. I also want to let you know that, but you can also purchase this book or check it out at the library. I highly recommend it. Right. So it says, to us, it is just dirt, the ground we walk on. Scoop up a handful, the gritty grains slip between your fingers. On wet days, heavy with rainwater, it is cool and squishy, mud pie heaven. But to Dave, it was clay, the plain and basic stuff upon which he learned from a life as a slave nearly 200 years ago. And so as we look at this picture, we can also see where Dave would potentially make the work, and that usually when someone has a skill like this, they learn it under the tutelage of someone else. So there's another potter who looks like he's a bit older, and Dave is here in the wings, and he's watching, and he's getting tips on how to make these pots. And it says, to us, it is just a pot, round and tall, good for keeping marbles or fresh cut flowers. But to Dave, it was a pot large enough to store a season's grains harvest, to put up salted meat, and to hold memories. Each one began out of clouds of dust, clotted clumps of clay, ground in the pug mill and carried, wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow, to Dave's spinning potter's wheel. With a flat wooden paddle large enough to row across the Atlantic, Dave mixed clay with water drawn from Big Horse Creek until wet and stiff and heavy. He threw the clay, sometimes 60 pounds at once, and nobody knew how or where it would land except for Dave. I'm going to take a little pause to just talk a little bit about that process of throwing clay. If you know anybody who's done ceramics, throwing clay is a very physical thing. It takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of stamina. Ceramicists have to throw the clay around, so it looks crazy, but they have to throw it around to get all of the bubbles out of the clay so that when they shape it and put it inside the kiln, a very hot oven, it doesn't explode. So this is a really important process of making clay, but for what we're going to use, we're going to skip that. No throwing clay for us. Dave kicked his potter's wheel until it spun as fast as a carnival's wheel of fortune. And so back then in the 1800s, we didn't have the electric spinning ceramicist wheels. So just like old sewing machines, it was all powered by the foot. And so he would take his foot and kick it, and it would spin that way. And so that was an extra layer of skill because not only did you have to pay attention to how you're forming the pot, but you also have to kind of keep a rhythm and pay attention to your foot and how that is moving. And so, like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat, you see the steps there. And if you ever get a chance to watch maybe a YouTube video of someone forming and shaping and sculpting a clay pot, it is truly magical. His hands chapped, thumbs pinched into the center, squeezed the inside against his fingers outside. As the wheel spun round and round, the walls of the jar rose up like a robin's puffed breast, but only so far before its immense weight threatened collapse. The jar grew so large, Dave could no longer wrap his strong arms around it. If he climbed into the jar and curled into a ball, he would have been embraced. I absolutely love this picture, and I'm going to kind of put it up a little bit closer. So if you look at the picture really carefully, what do you see? I see in the tree, in the branches of the tree, you can see faces. And I wonder who those faces might represent. Family members, loved ones, can represent people from his memory, ancestors. Be a number of things, but that is a beautiful image. Only then did he stop his potter's wheel and roll long ropes of clay between his dry, caked palms. Dave mounted these coils of clay one by one on the half-finished jar. He ran his wet fingers along the sides to smooth it all together, kicking the wheel with the heel of his foot. And so what we just saw was a coil pot, which we're going to try today. The shoulder and rim shrugged upwards as the jar took the shape, and Dave knew was there even before he worked raw mound on his wheel. While the clay dried, Dave pounded wood, ash, and sand to mix a glass-like brown glaze to withstand time. So potters will create a glaze, just like they mentioned here in this book, and it is covered, is painted onto the surface of the pot, sometimes inside, and it actually kind of works like a varnish and a protectant for the pot so that it can last for a really long time. And people have gotten very fancy with glazes. And so, but before the jar completely hardened, Dave picked up a stick and wrote to let us know that he was there. I wonder where is all my relation, friendship to all and every nation. There's notes here are real pictures of Dave's pots. Some of them are quite large. Right. And I encourage you all, if you can, to check this out at the library or even purchase it. All right, so for today's activity, we are going to work with air dry clay. Any air dry clay will do. Crayola is the one I'm using today. For this, we don't need to throw it. We don't need to add a glaze or anything to it. We don't need to put it inside of a kiln. It dries on its own. So before you start working, I am going to encourage you all to just make sure that you cover up your workspace with something. Make sure you protect the furniture that you have at home. So I'm going to use newspaper, but you can use a dedicated tablecloth or cloth, anything that your adult says it is okay to use. So for this, we are only going to get just a palm-sized piece of clay, about yay big. All right, and we're going to show you how to make pinch pots and coil pots. Okay, so for this, if you ever want to start off making a pinch pot, you start out with a circle or a ball. It's not a circle, it's a ball, a sphere, kind of like this. And so you want to set your pot down and just take your thumb and press it in there so you make a nice little indentation like that. And you simply just pinch the sides of your pot. Okay, so this can look as rough or as nice as you'd like it to look. And I'm not going to spend too much time on it today because I want to show you how to make a coil pot as well. So here is your pinch pot, and you can make sure that the inside is smooth. I always have like little marks because I have these very long nails, but here's your pinch pot. All right, our next activity, don't destroy yours. It's just for the sake of showing you what to do. The next thing we're going to show is how to make a coil pot. So coil pots are very fun, very easy. You simply just take a piece of clay and roll it in between your hands like this, kind of like you're warming your hands up, and you kind of make a little bit of a snake-like form, okay? Something that looks like a snake or a worm, something like that. And so when you get a long piece that is to your liking, you're going to roll it up like a little coil. I kind of like to think of this shape as kind of like a snail. But roll it up like so. And this will be the base of our coil pot. Okay, and so once you have your base, you can go ahead and start rolling out some more. Okay, and start building your pot up little by little. You can connect your pieces so that you can make a vessel. Also, one little note that if your clay seems a little dry, it's totally okay and acceptable to add a little water to it so that you can work it a little bit more. So if it's looking a little cracked or dry, add a little water to it. Not a lot, just a little will do. Okay, and then we're going to continue to build up our pot a little bit more. Build it up. Okay, and I think I'm going to add one more little layer here. Okay, so here is an example of a coil pot. So one thing you can do is after it dries, you want to just kind of put it up in a nice cool spot so it can dry. And it usually will take about a day, maybe two. And once it dries, one thing you want to do is you can go ahead and paint it if you'd like, but you can also add a little bit of a clear varnish on it. And that way it will hold and be really nice for you to use for something. Sometimes this air dry clay is a little fragile, so it might break a little bit. If that happens, one thing you can do, you can use a regular white Elmer's glue to paste and glue those parts back together. So I invite you to try to make your own pinch pot or your coil pot on your own at home, and have fun, guys. Thank you for joining us today.